Imagine signing up as a park ranger, eager to protect the tranquil sanctuary of wildlife. But instead, you find yourself fighting for survival as the creatures you vowed to safeguard transform into vicious predators. Nothing prepares you for the day when the peaceful hum of nature gives way to the roars of bloodthirsty beasts. It all started with the smaller animals. The birds pecked at each other viciously. Squirrels attacked rabbits without reason. Even the frogs in the pond seemed agitated, leaping at anything that moved. At first, I chalked it up to the change in seasons or perhaps a shift in the local ecosystem. But then, the larger creatures began to change too. The deer, usually so gentle and timid, started to gang up on the wolves. I found carcasses torn and scattered, a horrifyingly reversal of the natural order. I remember one incident vividly. I was doing a routine patrol around the park when I heard an unnerving growl. A grizzly, its eyes filled with an unnatural rage, was bearing down on me. I've encountered bears before, but this was different. Its eyes were filled with pure malice. I barely managed to scramble up a nearby tree to escape, hearing its frustrated roars as it swiped at the trunk below me. I reported these strange behaviors to the higher-ups. They sent some scientists who took samples, observed the animals, and left without a word. It's been weeks now, but no answers have been forthcoming. One night, as I sat in the ranger station, I heard an eerie howl. It was no animal call I've ever heard before. I peered out the window, and what I saw haunts me to this day. Creatures of all kinds, wolves, deer, even birds, stood side by side, their eyes glowing with that same vicious hunger I had seen in the bear. They had become organized, acting with a singular purpose. Every night they would gather, their roars and cries echoing through the park, hunting together, bloodthirsty. I've since stopped doing night patrols, and I've urged the authorities to close the park. I'm documenting everything in hopes that someone will find a way to restore the natural order. I can only hope that we find a solution before the violent tendencies of the wildlife spread beyond the park borders. It's unsettling working in the park now. There's a constant sense of unease, a fear that I'm being watched, hunted. It's no longer the peaceful sanctuary it once was. The wildlife, they've tasted blood and there's no going back. I've since fortified the ranger station as best as I could, but the nights have become truly terrifying. Each nightfall is greeted with a chorus of otherworldly growls and cries, the animals moving in unison like a singular terrifying entity. One night, the animals attacked the station. It was like nothing I'd ever seen. Deer and wolves, bears and cougars working together. They swarmed the building, clawing at the doors and windows. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't break in. Then, as quickly as it had started, the assault stopped. They retreated back into the darkness, leaving me to deal with the aftermath. The damage was extensive, but I was unharmed. That morning, as dawn broke, I ventured out, trying to assess the situation. The park was eerily quiet, as though the animals had disappeared. The silence was oppressive, even more terrifying than the violent chaos of the night before. I knew I had to get help. I managed to get a distress call out to the closest town, and they sent a group of armed men to help. But they couldn't believe what I told them about the animals. I don't blame them. I can barely believe it myself. Just as we were discussing our next steps, an unearthly roar echoed through the park. The men readied their weapons, but nothing could prepare us for what we saw next. The animals emerged from the trees, not as individual species, but as a monstrous, amorphous creature, like something out of a nightmare. I don't know how we survived that day, but I know one thing: the park is no longer safe. The wildlife have become something else, something sinister. I can only pray that whatever's causing this doesn't spread further. As for me, I've left my post as a ranger. I can't face the horror that my beloved park has become. I write this as a warning. Be careful when you venture into nature. For now, the natural world is not as it should be. It's filled with beasts, biding their time, waiting for the next prey to step into their territory. Just when I thought things might be calming down, a new horror unfolded. The armed men sent to help began exhibiting odd behaviors, mirroring the earlier changes in the wildlife. Their eyes, once filled with the determination to help, now gleamed with a savage hunger. Their words began to slur, their actions became erratic, and before long they started attacking each other. It was as if the same rage that had taken the animals was now inside them. I watched in utter shock from the safety of the ranger station. It wasn't just the animals anymore. The bloodthirstiness was spreading, transforming not just wildlife but humans too. I was now utterly alone. trapped in a park filled with creatures that were once my friends, my colleagues, and my sanctuary's residents. I immediately contacted the authorities, urging them not to send anyone else. I couldn't bear the thought of anyone else falling victim to this horrifying transformation. I was now isolated in the park, surrounded by these terrifying beings. And then the power went out. That was the last straw. I could no longer stay in the ranger station. I packed essential supplies, navigational aids, and set out to leave the park. Navigating through the land, once familiar, now filled with an eerie dread, was horrifying. Every rustle in the trees sent chills down my spine. Every shadow seemed to hide monstrous forms. I walked on, every step a battle between my primal fear and the desperate need to escape. And then, as if to validate my worst fears, I noticed the birds. They were circling high above the park, their cries echoing off the silent trees. I watched as they flew away from the park, dispersing in all directions. The infection was no longer contained, it was spreading. With this realization, a new sense of urgency overcame me. I decided to head for the city, to warn them. The journey was long and fraught with danger. Every so often, I'd hear the monstrous roars from the park, a chilling reminder of what I was running from. As I finally reached the outskirts of the city, I was met with an eerie sight. The city was quiet, too quiet. The bustle of traffic, the laughter of children, the hum of life. It was all missing. The silence was only broken by the soft rustling of leaves and the distant cawing of the birds. I pushed through the deserted streets, my heart heavy with fear. Had I arrived too late? Was the city already under the influence of the bloodthirstiness? My question was answered when I reached the city center. There in the square were the people, standing still as statues, their eyes vacant. But it was the birds perched on them, pecking away, that drove the horror home. The city had fallen. The affliction had spread. Now I'm on the move again. I don't know where to go or what to do. All I know is I need to survive and to keep trying to find help, to find someone, anyone who might be able to stop this, before there's no one left. Just then, out of nowhere, there was a burst of static from the old radio I had salvaged from the ranger station. It sputtered and spat before finally clearing into a weak but discernible signal. A voice, weary but determined, filled the silent city. If anyone can hear this, you're not alone. We have a safe haven at the old fort north of the city. The affliction doesn't seem to affect us there. Hope surged through me. I wasn't alone. There were others who had survived, others who might know what was happening, who could potentially help find a solution. With renewed vigor, I started moving north, away from the city and the eerie silence it held. The journey was harsh. I had to avoid the animals and the people afflicted, taking detours, hiding and running when necessary. After what felt like an eternity, the old fort came into view. It was fortified, well protected. Guards on the towers gave me a once-over before one of them shouted down, "You're human! Quickly, get inside!" I was ushered into a bustling hub of activity. People, real people, were walking around, talking, working. I was led to the command center where a group of people were hunched over maps and computers. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. I was part of a group of survivors working to understand and combat this affliction. For the first time in what felt like ages, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps we could stop this. Perhaps we could save what's left of our world. With the combined efforts of the survivors at the fort, we began researching the affliction that had plagued our land. We were a mix of biologists, doctors, park rangers, and everyday folks who had managed to escape the spread of the affliction. I shared everything I had witnessed at the park and in the city. The team mulled over it, looking for patterns, for clues, anything that might help us understand and combat the affliction. Weeks turned into months, and slowly but surely we started making progress. We discovered that certain frequencies seemed to disrupt the aggressive behavior in the afflicted. We managed to develop a device that emitted these frequencies, effectively creating a protective barrier around our fort. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. We had found a way to protect ourselves, but our work was far from over. We needed to find a way to reverse the affliction, to bring back the ones we had lost to the bloodthirstiness. We're still fighting. Every day brings new challenges, new discoveries. There are days when the situation seems hopeless, when the affliction feels too vast, too overwhelming to conquer. But then I look around at the people by my side, at the survivors who have refused to give up, and I find the strength to carry on. We don't know if we can ever fully return to the world as it was before, but we're not giving up. We'll fight this affliction until we can walk freely in our world again, until our cities are filled with laughter and life, and until the wildlife in the park is just that, wildlife. I'm no longer just a park ranger. I'm a survivor. I write this as a beacon of hope to anyone out there who is still fighting, still surviving. You are not alone. We are here, and together we will reclaim our world.